What's up, everybody? We're back with another episode of Fantasy Football 201. We are going to talk today about buy low, sell high, and waiver wire pickups heading into week one. So if you left the fantasy football draft, you weren't happy with some of the picks you got, and you're thinking about making a trade to set you up for success in week one, this video is going to help walk you through which guys to target for week one and help you get a head start on some good trades to make for the season, because that's where you win your money in fantasy football. It's not from how you draft, but it's because of the decisions you make as the season goes along. So if you're interested in more content like this, please check out my channel. I have a wide variety of strategy videos on fantasy football to include every single position, mock drafts from the past month, as well as team previews as well. So if you're interested in that, please check out my channel, as well as some other content too if you're interested in a wide variety of stuff. Please consider like, commenting, or subscribing. So we will talk today about prep for week one, some guys to buy low, sell high, and waiver wire pickups. But real quick, I want to go into a fan question from Ryan. I appreciate your support to the channel. His question today is asking about whether I prefer Marquez, Callaway, or Jaylen Waddle as a wide receiver. And my answer to this is Callaway because of average draft position. I think that both players have a lot of opportunity. They're both entering some wide receiver cores that got questions about them, so there's a potential void that could be filled, especially in New Orleans with Michael Thomas being out, and you don't know what Traquan Smith is going to be, as well as Miami. Will Fuller is suspended. They don't really have a lot of consistent number one receiver options other than that, unless you want to count Devontae Parker, but he is the definition of an up and down wide receiver. So they both have a lot of opportunity, but I prefer Callaway because his average draft position is end of the draft, whereas Jaylen Waddle, top 10 draft pick coming out of Alabama, he is going in the middle rounds. I'm not saying necessarily that I think Waddle will perform worse than Callaway, but I think Callaway is better value for where he's going. You're going to probably have to cost yourself some pretty consistent options for you that could be there when you need to take Jaylen Waddle. Some guys are even reaching for him as high as like 6th round and stuff like that. So it's, to me, if you're trying to take somebody like Jaylen Waddle, you have to pay a pretty significant price to get him. Whereas Callaway you can get relatively at the end, and he has got a lot of opportunity ahead of him. It's probably going to be more short-lived than Jaylen Waddle, but he's somebody that you could potentially flip and get you some more value later on. And that's going to be a theme with this video, is I'm going to talk to some guys that have good value in the present that you could possibly flip for more value later. The key when I'm looking at this information is that a lot of this is solely for week one, but then some of this is also to switch some assets around that have some hype going into the beginning of the season, but I think will actually perform worse than expected. So the way I'm going to start this is I'm going to start with my buy low guys, and I'm going to go through the positions. I'm going to do quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, and defense, and then we don't care about kickers, so we're not going to do that. But then what we're going to do is go through the sell high and go through the waivers with each of those positions as well. So my top buy low quarterback heading into week one is Lamar Jackson. So you might be wondering why would you buy low on Lamar Jackson? But Lamar Jackson has been consistently, I don't want to use the word disrespected, but that's kind of almost a way a lot of people are treating him. I know he kind of had an off year last year. There's some questions going around the media about, like, is this guy actually a starting level quarterback, or is he just an athlete that's going to eventually get figured out by the league? But there's no denying the stats this guy puts up, especially running the ball. And you consider the fact that this team now is depleted in terms of some of its running back options. That means Lamar Jackson could potentially be required to have more of a role running the ball. So that's just going to give him a higher floor in terms of his production. And then the other thing, too, is that he is going into week one against the Las Vegas Raiders on Monday Night Football. So not only is he going to be on a mission to prove to everybody that he is not a fraud like people say that he is, but he's going up against one of the worst defenses in football. So if you're going to take advantage of this guy's value being low, you've got to do it before week one, because what's going to happen is that he's probably going to go off Monday night, and then people are going to be talking about this guy like he's one of the best players in the NFL again. But right now, people are doing crazy things like taking Joe Burrow ahead of him and drafting Dak Prescott ahead of him and things like that just don't make any sense. So remember, this guy just obliterated fantasy football 2 years ago. That was the last season we had when things weren't affected by COVID, which, by the way, affected Lamar Jackson as well. So just keep those things in mind. Running back buy low candidates. Going to speed things up a little bit, but running backs to keep an eye on. Jamaal Williams. He is a little bit an undershadow of DeAndre Swift right now, but Swift has a lingering injury going into the season. Jamaal Williams has already been effective anyway with Green Bay as an effective number 2 running back. And if he takes on number 1 running back workload, he's going to have a lot of opportunity, especially on a team that is going to need some people to stand out because they don't really have that in their wide receiver core at the moment. Running backs that are also good buy lows, and I lump both of these guys together, is Tevin Coleman for the Jets and Raheem Mostert for the 49ers. Both of these guys probably not the best long-term investment in terms of, the fact that they have rookie running backs that are generally going before them in fantasy football drafts. But people are forgetting that, especially early in the season, it's still projected that Coleman and Mostert are going to be the lead backs for these teams. So again, you're looking at heading into week 1, taking advantage of guys at a low value and trying to flip that into higher value. You could probably give up pretty insignificant assets to acquire either of these two players, and they could give you solid production in week 1 at your running back position. Wide receivers. So I'm going to put all 3 of the Jags wide receivers here: DJ Chark, Laviska Shenault, and Marvin Jones, simply because week 1 they're going up against the Houston Texans, which is probably going to be the worst pass defense in football this year. And the Jags don't exactly have a great pass defense themselves, so more than likely this game is going to be a shootout. Of all 3 of these players, I like Laviska Shenault the most, but still, I think that if you buy low on these Jaguars receivers heading into this game against Houston, they will return a lot of value for you. Other receivers that I like, flip over the other side of the ball, you got Brandin Cooks. I think Brandin Cooks will have a great game for Houston. He is really their only established receiver that they have. Granted, Tyrod Taylor is throwing him the ball, so there's some questions about that. But still, this is the most established receiver on this team, and he's somebody that is going relatively low in draft boards. So if you could acquire him at a cheap trade, I think he could return a lot of value against a relatively poor pass defense. Another wide receiver to buy low on, Michael Pittman. I bring this up because Indianapolis is also dealing with their share of questions at receivers, notably T.Y. Hilton's back neck injury that he had. They don't really have a slew of other receivers. The next one up is probably Zach Pascal as their best receiver. So Paris Campbell in there as well. So Michael Pittman has a lot of opportunity, and it depends a lot on Carson Wentz, but I think going up against Seattle, which is not exactly the most consistent of pass defenses, Pittman could have a breakout week 1, and you want to buy this guy's value low because I think he's going to have an excellent season. Tight ends. So another guy that's going late in drafts that I think will really have people's opinions changed on him as the season goes along and they'll start valuing him more is Tyler Higbee. The Rams last year were platooning him and Gerald Everett. Now there's only Tyler Higbee. And then a lot of people might be low on him right now because they're going up against the Bears' vaunted defense. But the Bears are actually, according to last year's stats, the second worst team against tight ends. So expect that could be the weak point in their defense to get Tyler Higbee involved, especially compared to a lot of tight ends and the range that he is going in drafts. You got to buy this guy's value low because Higbee is going to have a good season, in my opinion. You want to try to take advantage of this before going into week 1. Defense to take advantage of. They're a relatively well-known, I don't want to say well-known, but they're a well-regarded defense. But I still think you got to buy low on them is San Francisco. I think going up against that week 1 matchup against Detroit, which has got Jared Goff at quarterback, you are going to have a lot of opportunity if you own the 49ers defense to put up some points, especially some pick sixes or some fumbles and whatnot. So Try to see if you can buy low on San Francisco, especially coming off an injury-riddled year. People might not be viewing them as highly as they have in the past. Sell high candidates. So I'm going to go through all the positions again. These are guys I recommend that you try to trade away, unlike some of the previous guys you want to try to trade for. So again, this might come across a little controversial, but I think the number one quarterback that you have to sell high on is Mac Jones. There are all kinds of people freaking out about I heard somebody on ESPN, I can't think of who it was, but he said that Mac Jones is going to potentially make the Patriots a Super Bowl contender. Are you serious? I don't even want to go into the reasons why, because that take is just absolutely ridiculous. But people are forgetting the fact that this guy played in Alabama, which is one of the most stacked teams in college football. What is this guy like when he's playing on a team in an NFL level, on a team that's not got the level of weapons that he did in Alabama? New England's best weapon that they have right now at the wide receiver is either Nelson Aguilar or Jacoby Myers. So, and they're going up against Miami, which is a very good defense. So, people are going crazy over Mac Jones. I think if you could sell him for a better quarterback that's going to be more consistent, or sell him for a flex player, that would be way more valuable than taking the gamble on Mac Jones. I would definitely try to sell him now. Other running backs, former Patriot Sony Michel. I think a lot of people are starting to get the opinion that Sony Michel is going to have a lot of opportunities in this Rams offense. But as I talked about with Darrell Henderson, who is the previous guy that everybody started hyping when he was looking to be the lead back there, the Rams will most likely use a running back by committee, and Sony Michel, unlike Darrell Henderson, does not offer anything in the passing game. So if you're in a PPR league especially, I think you have to try to sell Sony Michel. He was highly inconsistent in New England, and I really do not see that changing to such a drastic extent with the Rams. I would try to see if you could sell him, because there's probably people convinced that he could have a breakout year. We go back to the Patriots again. Rhamondre Stevenson. As much as I like the potential of this guy, I think it's a good time to try to sell him, because there's a lot of people thinking that he's, they traded Sony Michel away because Rhamondre Stevenson is going to be the next lead back, stuff like that. But New England is a team that always runs a running back by committee. They will have James White involved. They will have Damien Harris involved. Just try to see if you could sell this guy, especially after the preseason that he had, because I think you can get some pretty good running back value in return for him. Wide receivers to sell high on. So I talk about continuously how I do not trust this guy. Sell Amari Cooper. I know there's people that have this opinion of him being an elite wide receiver, but he is highly inconsistent. He's getting Dak Prescott back, so that would potentially help him, but that still doesn't take away the fact that throughout his entire career, he has had up and down games. They're also going against Tampa Bay in week 1, and I think you just got to try to see if you could flip Amari Cooper before he does have one of those dud games, and then people start questioning him. Try to get rid of him now before he plays a game, because I think his value will just depreciate from there. Other side of the ball, same game, Mike Evans, I think you have to sell. I think, again, as I talked about with New England, they're distributing the ball around so much. They're going to have all kinds of opportunities for different players. And a lot of people are thinking they're going up against Dallas' porous defense and Mike Evans is going to go off. That could very well happen, but it also could very well not happen, where, Chris Godwin does, or Antonio Brown, or maybe even Gronk, who knows? Maybe even O.J. Howard, who's also a tight end that people forget about. So there's just, my point is that there's so many weapons in New England, and they're going up against a notoriously bad defense, but it might not necessarily return the value that you think to take Mike Evans. I would try to sell him while you can. Again, I think once they start putting in some games and you start seeing the inconsistency that goes on in this Tampa Bay offense, these weapons will all lose their value. Another guy that I think you should try to sell high on, who's also a big name, Odell Beckham Jr. Odell, he's actually lost a lot of value in terms of how he's viewed around the league, coming off an ACL injury and some inconsistent games in Cleveland. But the glimmer of hope that some people have with him is that, Baker's seemingly figuring it out. Odell is coming back healthy again. They're going up against Kansas City in week 1, who is a team that has a reputation of being a bad defense, but is actually a very good pass defense. So, with that being said, I would try to sell Odell Beckham Jr. now. There are probably some people still out there who believe that this guy is one of the best receivers in the league. I don't really know who, though, that would be, but there are some of these people out there like that. So I would try to sell Odell Beckham and see what you can get out of him, because I think that, especially in this matchup that looks enticing but might not be, you can really get a lot of value out of him. Tight ends to try to sell. So I think the guy that you got to sell for tight ends is Dallas Goedert. There is some reputation in the league that Dallas Goedert is going to break out because, Zach Ertz is declining and Philadelphia has had success in the past with tight ends. But, a lot of this was back when they had Carson Wentz, who's no longer there, Doug Peterson, who's no longer there. Dallas Goedert is a better blocking tight end than Zach Ertz, so they will probably employ him more of that now that Zach Ertz is actually still on the team. And Jalen Hurts did not have, in games where it was just Dallas Goedert playing and no Zach Ertz, he played poorly because Jalen Hurts does not preference the tight ends like Carson Wentz does. Try to sell Dallas Goedert while you can, because this guy does not have as much value as people think that he does. And then defenses to sell. I mean, a lot of people are going to think I'm anti-Tampa Bay after this, but I think you got to try to sell Tampa Bay's defense because there's this idea that they are going to be an elite defense that should be taken, and they might very well be, but, I would try to, again, early season expectations, this is a defense that is going significantly higher than every other one. If you can flip Tampa Bay and then get like a solid running back somewhere in the middle, like a Jamaal Williams, and like you offer somebody Tampa Bay and then you're saying like, oh, I'll take Jamaal Williams and Miami defense. I would do that. I think that you downgrade a little bit with the defense, but Miami was still top 5 last year. So, yeah, that's an example trade, but I would try to do that with something like Tampa Bay's defense. And this just goes without saying, but try to see if you could sell somebody like Justin Tucker, Harrison Butker, and get a flex, because ultimately that's what you should be doing with kickers anyway, is dropping them. Watch my video on kickers and you'll see exactly how I break down that strategy. Waiver wire pickups. So these are guys that are over 50% available on ESPN, but I think are solid value for week 1 that you should consider on the waiver wires. Quarterback, Sam Darnold. I think Sam Darnold is he's kind of been forgotten about a little bit because he played inconsistently in New York. He obviously was replaced by Zach Wilson now on Carolina. But he's got some good weapons on this team this year. And this is probably for the first time in his career he's got guys like Christian McCaffrey, DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, guys like that. Terrence Marshall, another good receiver who's got potential there. But the other thing, too, is that he's going up against the New York Jets in what's going to be a revenge game for him. Much like Lamar Jackson, I think this guy is going to be on a mission to prove doubters wrong. And I think there is strong potential that he goes off on them. The other thing, too, to consider is that he was playing with Adam Gase as his coach last year. And we've seen numerous times where players break out after they leave just the horrid coaching that is Adam Gase. He's also, I mentioned this earlier, he's got Christian McCaffrey, so that'll take some pressure off him in the passing game. But he's got that kind of rushing attack potential. So this guy's got excellent value going into week 1. He's definitely somebody that you should try to pick up on waivers if you're going the stream route. Running backs. So Tyson Williams for Buffalo. Or not Buffalo, Baltimore, I'm sorry. But Baltimore is having a slew of running back injuries right now. They also just lost Justin Hill after they noticeably lost J.K. Dobbins. So now Tyson Williams is the number 2 projected running back. And Baltimore runs the ball so often, they're going to have 2 running backs with considerable value each game. So I would not be surprised at all if Baltimore, if they get out to a big lead on Las Vegas, they use Tyson Williams and then he gets a touchdown late in the game. And he's going to end up being a guy that is going to be one of the top waiver wire pickups for week 2. So get him in week 1 before you get to that point. Damien Williams is another guy that I really like for Chicago. I think Chicago, going up against the Rams, they're going to find themselves down quite a bit. They're not going to have a lot of receiving options down the field because they're going up against Jalen Ramsey, guys like that. So a lot of dump-offs to Damien Williams, who's kind of taking over that Tariq Cohen role for the Bears. I think he's got a lot of sleeper value for Chicago. Wide receivers. So, again, you got to pay attention to these teams that have not a lot of guys that stand out or project to be poor offenses because they do have some diamond in the roughs that come up. And one that I really like is Nico Collins from Houston. This guy is now stepping up as what looks to be the number 2 wide receiver for Houston. I think he's going to have a lot of opportunity in this Jacksonville game going up against a porous secondary. Again, another guy that I think that people aren't really paying attention to now, but is going to be one of the top pickups in week 2. Try to get him in week 1 because he's going to have a lot of value. And this is going to be moving forward too because this team, if Brandin Cooks continues to have the injury history that he has, Nico Collins has got a lot of opportunity ahead of him as well in that regard. Another player to pick up, and this is more so for injury potential to some of the other players, is Sterling Shepard. Sterling Shepard is also mostly available in a lot of leagues, but New York has got a lot of injury questions going into week 1. They've got Saquon Barkley's injury, which has been well documented, but then they also have potential lingering injuries to Kenny Golladay, the new number 1 receiver, as well as Evan Ingram, one of their tight ends. So, and Kadarius Toney is also questionable. So now you're looking at Sterling Shepard, and yeah, that's pretty much it. You could say Darius Slayton too, but I think Shepard is a little better than Slayton. So if you end up in that situation, he could potentially, where none of them play, Shepard could be looking at wide receiver 1. Numbers potentially for New York, depending on how effective they are against the Broncos. Tough defense, but again, he's going to get some targets. Tight end. A tight end I really like, and I talked about this team already, Dan Arnold for the Panthers. He came over from Arizona, if you didn't already know him. But he's going up against, I talked about the Bears being the second worst defense against tight ends. The Jets were the worst, and it was not even close last year. So this guy, if there's going to be some scheme changes going into this year, but Dan Arnold has underrated potential as the guy that's mostly available on waivers, expected to go up against a poor defense. I think he's got some good value as a stream tight end going into this week. Honorable mention goes to Tyler Conklin for Minnesota because Irv Smith is injured. I think there's a lot of natural targets that go his way, especially since they're playing another poor team in the Bengals. And speaking of the Bengals, I'm going to put Minnesota's defense as the defensive stream for this week because a lot of people, for whatever reason, think that Joe Burrow is going to suddenly break out for a Patrick Mahomes type season now that he has Jamar Chase. But they still don't have a line that is going to give them any noticeable protection, in my opinion. And I think that this is going to be all kinds of sacks for Minnesota defense that had a down year last year, but is still got a lot of talent. I think they surprised a lot of people and put up a pretty good performance in week 1. And then good kicker to stream, because you should be streaming kickers anyway. Mason Crosby is actually only 10% owned, which is very surprising to me. But Green Bay is not only an effective offense, but this week they're going up against a pretty good defense in New Orleans that I think will hold them out of the end zone from time. So I think Green Bay, I talked about the kicker formula of you try to find guys of the offense is going to get down the field, but they might not necessarily be able to punch it into the end zone. I think this is an excellent example of that, going up against the New Orleans defense that is going to be pretty good. Green Bay will have a lot of field goal attempts, in my opinion, and that should rack up some points for Mason Crosby. So that concludes my video for this week on buy low, sell high, and waiver wire pickups going into week 1. So if you got any questions going into week 1, comment those below. And what I'm going to do on Saturday is I'm going to have a mailbag question and answer video where I answer questions of fans. And if I don't get enough questions, I'll post some hypothetical ones for food for thought going into week 1. So it'll help set you up for success going into this first week. So let me know what you think of this video, and hope to see you guys next time. Bye.